sound we are recreating in Serum today. If you like it, make sure to subscribe, press the notification bell so you see all of our videos, and hit like on the video. What's up guys, this is Tassian with Cymatics, and today we're going to be recreating the lead from the song Salaam, Alaikum by Soltan. So I'm going to play the original and then I'll play you our version and then we'll get into making that. Alright, so that is the original and here's our version. So, I mean, so close, not exactly the same, but you know, you're never going to get a sound sounding exactly the same unless you recreate it the same way. So anyway, we're going to have this project file for download in the description below. So definitely get that download and follow along with us. That'll include the MIDI, the Serum patch, and basically everything you're seeing right here. So first thing I'm going to do is hit Command-Shift-T to make a new MIDI track, and then I'm going to open up Serum. And I'm going to copy this MIDI down so it's exactly the same. So now what you should be hearing is, which absolutely sounds like shit. So we're gonna fix that right now. So let's open up Serum. We're going to be using oscillator A, oscillator B, and the sub oscillator. We're not going to be using the noise oscillator. First things first, so all these notes aren't overlap. There's a ton of overlapping notes going on right now. And we're going to turn on mono, legato, and we're going to drag the portamento up to around 11 o'clock. And basically what that's going to do is all those notes that are overlapping are basically going to, instead of just being overlapping notes now, the mono means that it's monophonic, which means only one note can play at a time. So when notes are overlapping, that means that there's going to be pitch bending. And how long that pitch bending is determined by the portamento knob. So that's why we turn that up. So now what we should be hearing is... So yeah, we're getting really close, I mean, with the actual pattern of it, and we're just going to tighten that up. So let's turn on the sub oscillator and oscillator B. Sub oscillator is going to be this standard sine wave, and we're going to drop it down an octave, and we're also going to hit direct out. And basically what that's going to do is, you can even see if you hover over, it's going to bypass the filter and the effects, so you're going to have a clean sub. So oscillator A, we're going to make this salaam wavetable, and oscillator B is going to be the due to choir. So now what you should be hearing is this. So also what we're going to do is we're going to bump up oscillator A and B 2 octaves. And then for oscillator A, we're going to bump the unison up to 5. So basically that means that 5 of this oscillator A are going to be playing at the same time. And the reason why you're seeing those 5 vertical lines right there and why they're all spaced apart is because those voices are being detuned with this detune knob. So if we drag the detune knob all the way down, all the voices are exactly perfect pitch. But when we start to move the detune knob up, those vertical lines, the green ones, are moving farther and farther away from the center. And that is signifying them being more out of tune, which will create like a nice thick like phasing sound, and it actually sounds really good. So the 2 vertical lines on the right are being tuned a little bit higher, and the 2 on the left are tuned a little bit lower than perfect. So we're going to have this detune knob around right here, so you should be hearing this. And just to make it really dramatic, let's drag this detune knob up just so you can understand what the detune effect does. So we're going to drag it down to around 9 o'clock, and we're going to take the blend all the way up. So the more detuned voices, this blend knob controls the volume of the out of tune voices versus the in tune voice. So when you turn it all the way up, it means that those out of tune voices are going to be slightly louder than the in tune voice. So you should be hearing something very similar. Just because these voices aren't, you know, extremely out of tune. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to, for oscillator A's warp mode, we're going to select bend minus, and we're going to drag this to around 10 o'clock. And what bend minus does is it basically finds the middle point of the oscillator or the wavetable, and it starts to push from the inside out, so it just spreads the wavetable apart. So you can see if I bring this all the way up, it really stretches out the middle and pushes all the outer stuff to the side. So we're going to drag this to around the 10 o'clock area, and you should sound like this. Again, not terribly different. It's not going to be a huge effect. So let's move on to oscillator B. We're going to drag the wavetable position all the way up. Then we are going to make oscillator B's warp mode the pulse width modulation, the PWM, and we're going to drag that to around 10 o'clock. And what this does is, you know, kind of what you're seeing, it takes the one side and it just squeezes it all the way to the other side. So we're going to drag it right there, and that's just going to make the sound a little bit thinner and give it just like a different tone. So it still sounds very similar, but if we turn up all the way, you can hear a slight difference. All right, so now would be a good time, since we are done with all of the oscillators, to get into our envelopes. So envelope 1 is going to look a little something like this. We're just going to take this point right here, which controls the decay and sustain if we drag it down, and we're going to drag it down to around right here, right before this little very transparent line, and we're going to take the curve up to about there. And this is controlling the overall volume of every oscillator. So let's see if that makes a difference. It does. You can hear that sound starting to trail off, especially with some of those middle notes. And this will just like kind of tame the sound a little bit. Then we're going to do envelope 2. Envelope 2 is going to look something very similar. We're just going to take this and we're going to drag it to around right here, just before this transparent line. And we're going to make this completely straight. So we're not going to give it any curve. And this is going to be modulating like 6 different things. So it's going to be modulating 3 things on the oscillators, and then we're going to get into the filter. So first we're going to throw envelope 2 on bend minus, and then we're also going to throw it on the wavetable position, and we'll drag that to just around the halfway point, and then the pulse width modulation, and then we're going to drag that down all the way. So what this will be doing is when the MIDI is triggered, this envelope will be controlling these knobs and modulating them. So let's listen to what we have right now. So very, very slight difference, nothing super major, but it's all these little things added up that if you would start to take them away one by one, you'd really start to notice the sound just kind of like tailing off like an interest level. So the next thing that we're going to do, which is going to give a very drastic difference, is we're going to turn on this filter, and we're going to make sure that A and B are selected. So both of these oscillators are being fed through the filter, and we're going to go and select miscellaneous and band reject. So this looks like more like a notch filter right now. Like it's just kind of like, looks like it's not going to do anything. But when you turn the width up, you can see this big dip. So it's pretty like popular for making like valley type sounds. So we're going to turn this width up, and now you can hear it. It got really, really thin. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to turn this width up actually a little bit more, and then we're going to pump this resonance up. And then we are going to turn this cutoff down a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to take envelope 2, and we're going to modulate the width. So it's going to be kind of making this. You can hear that like wah, wah, wah kind of like sound, and that is what the band reject is doing. So let's take envelope 2, and we'll drag the width up to around 1 o'clock, and then we're going to actually take the range and drag it backwards to around 10 o'clock. So now you should be hearing, and it's like right when the transient hits, you're really hearing like this kind of like wah sound. And we're just going to like tame this back a little bit with the mix knob and turn the mix knob to about 1 to 2 o'clock, and this is just going to kind of, you know, tone down that sound. All right, so for our first effect, we're going to select filter. Let's just drag this up to the top, and this is going to be a multi-filter, the PP12. And right now we're going to drag this cutoff down a little bit. We're going to bring the resonance up, and we're going to bring this frequency up a little bit. And this frequency is the other filter, the other part of the filter. So again, nothing absolutely crazy, but we're going to drag this envelope 2 to the cutoff and drag that to around 2 to 3 o'clock. And we're also going to drag this to the frequency and drag this back to around 2 o'clock. So now it'll be modulating another filter. Now you can definitely hear that. That is a huge difference right there. So it's kind of almost not sounding super clean. It's kind of sounding distorted and muddy. So we're going to take this mix down to a little bit before halfway, right about 40%. And you can hear it like little by little starting to sound a little bit nicer. Then we're going to turn on the hyper and dimension, and we are going to drag the detune up a little, leave the rate about right there, turn the mix down, and we're going to turn the size down here and the mix to right about there. And we can play with these settings, and this is basically just going to give us our stereo image. So oftentimes on a lot of our presets, we have these macroed to dimension expander and hyper detune. So you can play with a few of these macros and really like dial it in how you want. But this is mainly how it's going to sound. So it's just giving it kind of a bigger stereo image and just making it sound a little bit more interesting. After that, we're going to have the distortion, and we are going to select soft clip mode. And we're going to drag this drive up to around 2 o'clock and drag the mix down to around 60%. So this is just going to like kind of compress it a little bit, bring out some harmonics, and just beef it up. All right, so the next thing we're going to add is a compressor, and this is going to be a multiband compressor. So we're going to select multiband, and this is basically the OTT settings, the over-the-top compression, which is like a really famous compression type that is used by like a ton of dubstep and trap producers, as well as like, you know, house and anyone else. And basically this is just compressing everything really, really hard, and it's kind of taking away the transients and smoothing everything out and just giving everything like a nice texture. And it's also like bringing out the highs and just making everything sound like nice and fat. So what's actually cool about this Serum compressor is that you can actually take these bands and slide them, and this kind of acts like a compression and also like an EQ. So we're going to take this top one and go to 85, this bottom one and go to around 80, somewhere around there, and the lows, and take it all the way down to 0. So now what you should be hearing is this. So it's really just taming those sounds. And we're going to play with these settings a little bit. So we're going to take the threshold and bring it up a little bit. So this is going to compress it just a tiny bit less. And we're going to leave the ratio where it is, the attack where it is, and we're going to drag the release down a little bit to about 9 o'clock. And this is just going to, the compressor is just going to stop compressing a little bit quicker than it normally would. And then we're going to take this gain up to around right here. So we should be hearing. So it's sounding really nice right now. And then we're going to add an EQ. And we are going to select this low cut right here. We're going to take the Q down a little bit, and this is just going to add like a smoother low cut than if we had the Q all the way up, or, you know, back to where it was. So we're going to bring the Q around 11 o'clock, and we're going to bring this frequency knob up a little bit. And so you should be hearing. Sounds very similar because there's not a ton of lows in this sound to begin with, but we're just EQing that just to be sure, just in case you want to drop it down an octave or anything. We don't want it to get muddy. And then we are going to select this high cut as well, and we're going to bring the frequency knob up pretty high, almost to, you know, just right about there. And we're going to take this Q knob and put it to the same spot. So now you should be hearing something almost sounding exactly the same. And then the last thing we're going to do is throw this reverb on here. And we're going to take the size down a little bit just so it's a smaller reverb. take the decay down to around right there, like 2 seconds. We're going to bring the low cut up to about right here. And this is just cutting a lot of the lows. And then we're also going to bring the high cut up to around 2 to 3 o'clock. And that is just cutting some of the highs as well. So you're just going to be left with this like kind of mid-range reverb. And we're also going to take the spin down a little bit. So now you should be hearing. So just a very faint reverb, but it is there, and that's just adding like a bigger space. So that is it for this patch, and the only other thing we need to do is go back to the original track, and we're going to copy over this digital clip center saturator preset over to the new one. So we should be hearing. Pretty simple patch, nothing too hard, but it's just knowing how to do the right things at the right time that'll really just get you really good at sound design, and it'll just have you start efficiently making cool sounds. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to get the download in the description, so that'll come with the project file and the preset, the MIDI, and the wavetables. So definitely get that, and maybe, you know, run the video back and just trying to make it on your own, because after a few times of doing this, you'll pick it up and then you won't forget. But anyway, thank you for watching. I'm Tassion, and this is Cymatics.